He sets up kings and deposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He develops deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. So the understanding of God regarding darkness is complete. He knows what lies there. And look at the next verse in Isaiah. We read it earlier. A people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. So in the darkness of the world that we're seeing, God is bringing an answer, a light. And prophetically, he announces it there. Plato said this: we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. So take a look then at how the Bible's history records all these things. If you look at the Bible, in its beginning, you say it began with the theme of creation. So God created, man sinned, God brought light, men brought darkness. As a result of their sin, they're hiding in the garden saying, we don't want God to see us. And so they are pursuing darkness because they do not want to be seen in their own sin. So God brings light, man brings darkness, and then through the generations of time, God brings the flood, which corrects the evil on the earth. But then more darkness follows by their attempt to build a tower of some great size in order to say to God, look how big and good and strong we are. So you have light followed by darkness, followed by light, followed by darkness, and the ebb and flow continue. And then you get into the next particular period, which is the patriarch period, where we have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph in their respective generations and the importance they serve in the formation of Israel. But then we see in their particular storyline one thing after another occurring. God brings light, but there's darkness in there. This happens well, but there's a family member who destroys this. You have Joseph who is born, and the father loves him, but then the other brothers are jealous and throw him into a cistern and make believe that he has died so the father would forget all about him. One story after another, light, darkness, and the Bible story continues. Finally, these same people are now trapped in Egypt for 400 years. They're in this tremendously bad slavery situation and in darkness. But God, in his light, brings Moses to deliver them out of there. And light has come. But then as they are being delivered from there, God says, go to the promised land, and there's enemies there, but I will have you defeat those enemies to get your land. They said, no, the enemies are too good, too big, too strong. We can't battle them, God. And so they backtrack, and God said to them, okay, you're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years now because of not trusting me. And so you had the darkness of slavery, you had the light of deliverance, but then you had the darkness of doubt. And then finally you have the light where God sends them forth into their promised land in order to finally conquer what they should have conquered 40 years ago. And they find their new home, and they have experienced light again, the conquest of a land. They're in their land finally, and they say, we need leadership, and God gives them judges, and that's light. But some of those judges are evil. That's darkness. And then we see these cycles where people are obeying God, but then they begin to not obey, and they slip away, and there's judgment, and bad things happen. They recover, and they're back doing well, and then they slip away. Another bad judge leads them astray. Back, if they come back and repent, and things are well, but then another. And after 7 cycles of this, covering a 400-year period, these things are going on. Light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. All throughout the history of Israel. People say, okay, enough of this. Judges want a king. We want to be a kingdom. We want to be the kind of people like every other kind of nation around there. We want to be a kingdom. God says, okay, I'll give you a king. But the same thing happened. They had good kings and bad kings. And they went through the same thing. And then their kingdom got divided because Solomon, as the great wise king, began to fall away himself at the end of his life. And civil war occurred, and the kingdom was now divided. And now the northern kingdom was seen as unrighteous, the southern kingdom was seen as inconsistent, and they were stopped and defeated and removed from the planet. They lasted longer, but still they disappeared as well. And these are the days of Israel, light and darkness, light and darkness. They continue through the history of all this, and They find themselves in exile for 7 years. All the people left over all these divisions and misery, they get dragged off into Babylon. There in Babylon, they're going to live for 70 years. Daniel's going to write his prophecies from Babylon. They've lost their land. They've lost their temple. They've lost their word. They've lost their own names. Everything has dramatically changed. And now in that particular place in exile, things are very dark. But God prophesies that the best is yet to come through Daniel. And sure enough, the day ends. The exile is over. Light has returned. They're heading back joyfully now to the land that they left, and they find nothing but darkness. The walls are gone, destroyed. The temple is destroyed. The homes are destroyed. Everything's a mess, all rubble. And now they have to start the process of rebuilding the walls and the temple and the people and the law. And they begin that process together, and they find light in that process. Good things, bad things. Good things, bad things. And Jerusalem is restored, and good things are on the way. But then we get into a period of 400 years of silence, where nothing really happens biblically. What we find is everything is happening as changes in the history of the land. Alexander the Great moves in. The Greek language dominates the land because of it. Persia is now overcome, and Alexander is the man on the scene. Political groups develop. Religious groups develop. Legalism intensifies. The need for the Messiah, the hope for the Messiah intensifies. It's a very dramatic, though silent 400 years. And then, as Daniel prophesied and Isaiah prophesied, 300 other prophecies occurred. Jesus is born. On that particular night, in the darkness of that night, amazingly, shepherds led to this site, wise men following a light in order to find the one who is the light of the world. And they get to this particular scene, and there is this baby in swaddling clothes in a manger. And one might wonder, what's the big deal? This happens all the time, right? But this child was different than every other child, only confirmed by the years of his life and how he grew and the stature of his own holiness, and how he began to teach right away, and how he had a sense of his own understanding as a Messiah. His own sense of divinity was occurring. Why did Jesus have to be a man? Why? Why didn't he just kind of come straight here and just do what he had to do? Why come as a baby? Because the sacrifice that God desired had to be two things. It had to be perfect and sinless, and it had to be human, because it was a sacrifice for humanity. So Jesus had to be fully God and fully man to make a sacrifice that was perfect and yet representative of us, because he was dying for us on the cross. How is it that you put someone on the cross who's never suffered? How is it you put someone on the cross who has no idea what it is to live out the life we live? This is someone who has been fully God, fully man, and dies for us. And then he rises, and then he ascends, and then he promises to return. And then the church is born, and the church is given the opportunity to take this message. Jesus says, I'm the light of the world, and you are the light of the world, and I'm going to send you forth into the world to bring this light. And missionary journeys were sent in order to say, let's do this then and now. Bring this good news, bring this light to the far reaches of the planet. And it's all done in fulfillment of Isaiah 42, 6 and 7. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles, to open eyes that are blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. This is Isaiah writing this, at least 1,000 years before Christ has come. And he's telling us that it's all about that experience of finding light in the midst of darkness. And the message is to go to all people, Jew and Gentile alike. Okay, so we get down to the nitty-gritty. Here's Jesus, 30 years old, 31. The day has arrived. It's the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles is this dramatically great big feast. They're celebrating two things. They're celebrating, on the one hand, that they had the opportunity to drink water from a rock when they were actually wandering the wilderness. How did they get water? The water came from the rock that God supplied. It just poured out and they drank from it. They celebrated the water that came, and they also celebrated the fire that God led them through at night. In the darkness, God came as a pillar of fire and said, "Follow me." In the daytime, he was a pillar of cloud. At nighttime, he was a pillar of fire, and he said, "Follow me." So Jesus, at this Feast of Tabernacles that are celebrating this event for 7 days, realizes and he knows that at this particular time, not only are they taking water and pouring it on the altar to symbolize the water that came from the rock, but they're going to set up these 4 huge candelabras. And when I say huge, I mean huge. These lights filled with oil were so large that it's been said that NASA could see these things, if NASA was working at the time, could see these lights from space because there was no other light competing with it. They were large. These lights are so large that all of Jerusalem could glow in its presence. It was that kind of brilliance of light. And Jesus walks into this particular scene and sees the great lights and sees the attention of the people and says, "I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you'll never walk in darkness, but you'll always have the light." And he communicates this to the people. And they understood him, and many followed him. Jesus became the one who was the light of the world. This is what Stanley Kubrick had to say when he was talking about the issue of the meaning of life. He's a film director, and he said this: "The very meaninglessness of life forces man to create his own meaning. The most terrifying fact about the universe is not that it's hostile, but that it is indifferent. However vast the darkness, we must supply our own light." This was his view. And frankly, it's the view of much of Hollywood today. There's a website called Experience Project. It was telling people to share their experiences and their feelings about various things. And one woman said this: "I prefer darkness over light. The darkness allows me to hide who I am and what I truly feel. In the light, all things have a chance to be revealed. Darkness makes it easier to hide. In the dark, you cannot see what is coming next. The darkness is a place where you can lose yourself. Lost in the dark is a great place to be because you are free from what you were and can be what you want. The darkness is bliss." But the Bible presents just the opposite view. You see this picture that heaven's light shines into everything, and we have hope. Heaven's light shines into our discouragement, and into our pain, into our suffering, into our confusion, into our hopelessness, into our family crises, into our temptations, into our betrayals, into our anger, into our sense of fear about terrorism by blinded sinners or acts of evil in our country. We believe that heaven shines light into all of these experiences because there is always hope. It's so appropriate that wise men followed a star, a light in the sky, to follow and find the light of the world. Christmas is the revelation of the light of God breaking through the darkness of man. We now have hope among us. Peace is within our grasp as a consequence of our faith, and nothing will ever be the same again. The world has been in spiritual darkness since the fall of Adam and Eve, but the light, the hope, the truth, the word, the eternal one who opens the eternal way for us deserves our worship. So if your Christmas is about chaos and not Christ, then you are missing the whole point. It's not about your gifts, it's about his gift. It's not about the lights in your house, it's about the light in your soul. It's not about a man in a red suit, it's about a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. It's not about finding a sale, it's about finding a Savior. It's not about saying Merry Christmas, it's about being merry at Christmas. celebrating your salvation.